I'm afraid I must apologize to you, because this week I gave Games Workshop money that I probably shouldn't have, because I paid for the new Tyranid codex. But I hope you'll forgive me, because I just had to see if it's as bad as people have said it is. And you know what? It is. In fact, it's even worse than I imagined. When Warhammer 40k 10th edition was originally sold to us, it was done so on a number of promises. And this week, Games Workshop basically broke all of those promises. And yet, while the community has generally rallied around the company, enjoying the excellent sculpts of the new miniatures, there is the beginning of a simmering, burgeoning resentment building in the community. A well is currently being poisoned, and it is going to spell problems for Games Workshop down the line, but also for all wargaming hobbyists. And if you haven't heard the news, well, it's true. The very first codex of Warhammer 40k 10th edition has arrived with all the grace of a used car salesman sloshing from behind the counter after his 11 AM gin and tonic. His sweaty palm is outstretched, ready to sell us a bad deal. And that's fine if you know to avoid sweaty salesmen trying to sell you 400% interest rate finance packages. But this year, it's all a little different. This year is a very special year for Warhammer 40k, because this year, hundreds of thousands of new wargamers have dipped their toe into the wargaming hobby for the very first time. And oh, what an introduction to wargaming 10th edition 40k has been. Warhammer 40k 10th edition launched just a few months ago with two factions on the cover of the launch box. Space Marines because, well, of course, I mean, it's still Warhammer, and Tyranids because I guess Games Workshop just don't want to play with Necrons anymore. Sorry. Bye. Don't worry, they'll be back. This means that a lot of new players are now playing Tyranids as a result, and that's neat. Tyranids make for a nice introduction to the Warhammer setting. Their models are fun to paint, and it's always a joy to get to play as the good guys. What, you thought the Space Marines were the good guys? And I suppose you think the Federation and Starship Troopers are the good guys too. I don't care if you're from Buenos Aires, the Mormons started that war. But here's the big problem. All those new players, well, this week they just got a crash course in what it means to be a fan of Warhammer 40k. First, there were the data cards. Over the last 2 months, Games Workshop have been selling data cards for all the stats and data sheets in the Tyranid army at $20 a pop. Lots of people bought these, only to discover this week that they've just been rendered totally redundant by the new codex that has just come out. So basically, $20 wasted. So basically, I hope you played hundreds of games in the last 3 months, otherwise you just wasted $20. And if you are a very clued in hobbyist who is aware of the Games Workshop business model, maybe you watch content creators like me who try to warn consumers about a lot of the predatory and downright deceptive business practices of Games Workshop, then you probably didn't buy those data cards because you knew that a codex was inevitably on the way. But if you're new to the hobby and maybe you believe that Games Workshop are just a fun little hobby company trying to create great products, then you probably bought the data cards, believing that they would be invaluable to your games. The Games Workshop wouldn't render them totally redundant in just a few months. I mean, that's wild. No one would stand for that, right? It wouldn't be allowed. People wouldn't give them their money. It wouldn't be allowed. It wouldn't be allowed. Well, sorry, but I got bad news. And ironically, even the codex that just released this week, rendering the data cards obsolete, has itself been rendered obsolete, because Games Workshop have already updated the stats and points values that you can get in this codex. So yeah, oops. But not to worry, because one of the few bright spots of 10th edition, the surprisingly well put together Warhammer 40k app, comes with all the most up-to-date data sheets and rules that players need, totally free of charge. How awesome is that? And Games Workshop got tons of praise for this obviously really good thing that makes the game way more playable and fun. But then, this week, everything changed.
When the Fire Nation attacked.
And the Tyranid content was put behind a $60 paywall. All of the previously free index content is now totally gone from the app, and it's even been removed from the website too. And to get access to any of the Tyranid content whatsoever, you need to pay $60. So if you want to play Tyranids or even just see what they can do, you gotta give Games Workshop a whole lot of money. You're going to need to buy a $60 physical codex. And this is such a massive step backwards, such a hugely boneheaded move that it genuinely astounds me. And as a result, I can only implore you, if you play an army in Warhammer 40k right now, then you should go to the Warhammer community website and download the index contents before a future codex removes your free content as well. If you play Space Marines, you've probably got like a week. For me, Games Workshop at this stage have basically thrown all of the goodwill that they previously generated right onto the bus. And this is just the beginning. Soon enough, the entire Warhammer 40k app will be totally unusable. So any praise that you've been hearing about 10th edition so far, about it being more accessible than ever, just ignore that, because it's all a lie now, and every breath that we draw brings us closer to the end of time. But you still need to buy the physical book for all the lovely lore and pictures inside. It still has value, right? Right? Sadly, no, not with this new Tyranid Codex. There are pictures inside, and they are pretty enough, and there's even a pretty cool how to paint Tyranid section for new players. But overall, there's just not very much of them, and the book itself is extremely thin. But even worse, there's barely any lore in here at all, and the little there is copy-pasted from the previous Codex and the Leviathan book from the launch box. There's not much new in here, if anything, for Tyranid fans. So what the hell is the point in this physical book? Who is this book for? Why does it exist? Why has it rendered everything else around it absolutely trash? Well, it's sadly obvious. This book simply exists to justify a $60 paywall for players to have to spend in order to get access to the datasheets and the 12 pages of exclusive detachment rules that can't be found anywhere else. That's why they took all the free content away from the app and the website. That's why you can only get those rules if you buy this physical lodestone. It's all to create artificial value. But it gets even worse, because these 12 pages of detachment rules that are so valuable to Games Workshop are in actuality a chilling vision of things to come. I'm seriously concerned for the future of 10th edition, and you should be too, you know, unless you love bloat. Everyone loves bloat, right? Well, according to survey after survey in 9th edition, no one likes bloat. But unfortunately, we're gonna get inundated with bloat because our worst fears have been sadly realized, and the most hated element of 9th edition has returned in this new codex: stratagems. Oh, I hope you love stratagems, because get ready for all the stratagems in the world. Yes, stratagems, those special powers that armies could cast in 9th edition, and throughout that edition, they were one of the most complained about features, especially by casual players. There was just too many. In survey after survey, it became clear that packing every single 9th edition codex with 32 stratagems per faction was a huge mistake. And because there were so many stratagems, most casual players couldn't remember what use any of them were, when they could deploy these stratagems, what powers they could utilize, and what stratagems their opponents could use against them, leading to unfun gotcha moments during games. And this all led up to a reliance on homework and studying outside of the game rather than just simply playing it at the table. And when 10th edition launched, it was sold on the premise of simplified, not simple.
And there was much rejoicing.
And one of the elements of the agenda of simplified, not simple was to fix stratagems. And Games Workshop did! They actually resolved this problem. Every faction that was released into 10th came with only 6 stratagems. 6 impactful stratagems that made huge changes to the game. And because these were limited in number, they were far easier to remember. And they were also published online for free, so everyone could see what everyone else could do. It was pretty awesome. There's lots of problems with 10th edition 40k, but the stratagems and the amount of them and how they operate, that's not a problem in 10th edition Games Workshop. That's not a problem. But all of that has now changed, because all those Tyranid stratagems are now hidden on the app behind a massive $60 paywall. So I hope you're happy to take that guy's word for it down at the club, unless you want to pay all that money. But it gets even worse, because the codex doesn't come with the 6 stratagems that we already knew about. It comes with 30 stratagems inside. This is a huge leap up from 6 and a huge leap backwards for the game. And it's not far off the 32 stratagems that 9th edition codices came with and caused all the troubles with 9th in the first place. And sure, this time it's only 6 per detachment, but that doesn't matter to me if I'm facing a Tyranid player because I have no idea which stratagems belong to the Endless Hordes detachment and which belong to the Swizzy Buzzflaps detachment. I mean, did I make those detachment names up? Well, you don't know unless you pay $60. This is seriously going to be a massive problem for 10th edition down the line when every faction gets their 6 different detachments, all with their own stratagems, all 30 to play with. Of course, all of this assumes that new players even buy the correct codex, because Games Workshop were so lazy with the Tyranid one that they didn't even bother to update the art on the cover. Seriously, the cover art on the 10th edition codex is literally a reproduction of the 9th edition one. Except, no, actually, in fairness, it has a tiny little difference. You see that? There's a little faction badge kind of hidden, nestled away in the background. What are they thinking? This is a disaster waiting to happen. And there will be unscrupulous store owners and secondhand sellers who will be offloading their 9th edition codices onto newer players who don't know better, thinking that they're getting the most up-to-date codex, and if they Google an image of it, they're probably gonna think, yeah, actually, this is up-to-date. I'll pay all of the money for it. What is going on here? This is going to hurt new hobbyists, and it's so obvious. I mean, at this stage, it feels like a scam. This feels like an actual scam. It almost doesn't feel like it was done by accident. But as always, I'm going to try and chalk this one up to utter incompetence rather than maliciousness. Negligence, more like. But hey, at least Wikipedia is coming back now, so the game will be playable again at some stage, I guess. I was seriously worried that that guy had been conscripted into the Russian military. We need him now more than ever. Overall, I gotta say, this Tyranid release has been one of the most disappointing releases for a Warhammer game I have ever experienced. It feels like a massive rug pull by Games Workshop. It does feel like a scam, like they tricked us into thinking that things would be better with the launch of 10th, with all of their marketing about simplified, not simple, their marketing around the rules being free, about the datasheets being accessible, and now they're just going back on their word. They're just going back on all of this. They actively lied. This entire Tyranid wave is the very first big wave for the new edition of Warhammer, and it's an utter disaster. Sure, okay, the models look cool. I like the look of the new Tyranid models, but the pricing for them is nutty. $60 for the Death Leaper. Hormagaunts are $50, Gene Stealers are $55, and it's $115 for the Norn Emissary. Hell, it's $50 for the Pyrovore, and that's a model that's worth 30 points in the game. It's $50 for the Lictor and $45 for Termagaunts. These prices are wild. They're not worth it, and I can only imagine what a culture shock it must have been for the thousands of returning Warhammer players who last touched the game 15 years ago and have now returned to 10th edition, only to discover that it no longer costs $30 for the codex, but $60. And to have a full unit of Termagaunts, it's gonna cost them $100. Suddenly, a luxury hobby like going to the f***ing moon looks positively affordable. But hey, if you really like the datasheets the Games Workshop were selling before and then rendered redundant, don't worry, because they're now selling updated versions. Huzzah! There is one downside though. They've gone from $20 3 months ago to $35 now. That's right, even the data cards, a product that was just invented 3 months ago, is already going up in price. This is like a caricatured version of Games Workshop. You couldn't actually make it up. It's ridiculously villainous. At this stage, I wouldn't be surprised if I caught them tying a damsel to a railway. But you know what the worst thing about all of this is? The absolute worst element? They're sold out. They're totally sold out for now. But that's the business model of Games Workshop: attract new hobbyists and try to burn them out as fast as possible for the most amount of money that they can possibly get away with. They don't want some of the money, they want all of the money, and this is just the beginning. If you don't collect Tyranids, I hope you can see what's happening here, because you're next. I mean, I'm not. I play Sisters of Battle, so you know, I've got a couple of years left, but still, we can see what's coming. At least Age of Sigmar actually has free rules for real. The orcs in that game just got a genuinely free codex released on Warhammer Community, and that's great, and people are praising that. But I have to wonder, if Age of Sigmar was more popular, would Games Workshop be doing the exact same thing to that game too? Yes, is the answer. Yes. It just feels like 10th edition was an absolute cluster, and there needs to be a cull at the executive level of Games Workshop. But if you're new to the hobby, please don't judge every war game company off the decisions of Games Workshop. If you're feeling like the company itself is acting hostile and trying to nickel and dime you every step of the way, that they're more interested in the contents of your pocket than making a fun hobby experience, well, that's because they are. And I've covered the economic and predatory reasons for that extensively on my channel, so check out some of my videos and maybe subscribe. And remember, there's lots of far more welcoming war games and miniature companies out there, and I cover them on my channel. Here's a video covering a bunch of those here. And as always, a huge thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev, Nobody, and Travis Hunter. Thank you so much, guys. I couldn't make this content without you. I'll catch y'all next time. Bye-bye.